Hey, Alex, welcome to DAO Talk.
Hey, Tyler. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, thanks for joining. Maybe you can just get us started by talking a little bit about your background, how you got into crypto and Web3, and then maybe leading up to what you're working on now.
Yeah, sure. So I guess starting with academic background, I studied systems engineering. I went to school at WashU in St. Louis, so spent some time in the Midwest. And I went into finance after college and worked in an investment bank doing M&A work and IPOs and public offerings. And pretty much a month or two into that stint, this is mid 2016, I started following crypto. I found it from a Fred Wilson blog.
Nice.
And
Classic.
He was talking about CoinMarketCap and Ethereum. And I looked at CoinMarketCap and I saw just crazy volatility on the coins that were around at the time. And like they had the sort of first round of ICOs at that point. So a couple of those coins are still around, most of them aren't. But initially I thought, okay, this would be kind of interesting to, algo trade.
Yep.
And then I started reading about more of them, digging into white papers. It became a sort of nights and weekends hobby. And it just struck me as being almost diametrically opposed to what I was doing in investment banking, which effectively was selling companies to a very privileged and small list of companies and people. And ICOs were saying, screw TradFi. Let's throw up an ETH address and collect funds from all around the world. And that seemed like a much more interesting foundation to build the internet-based global financial system on. And so as someone with an engineering background and interests in finance, it struck me that most of the interesting ideas at that intersection were happening in crypto. And it was attracting a lot of people that had diverse backgrounds, had different sets of interests that sort of came from all sorts of different angles, and were interested in solving big, hairy problems that I think are important to solve. And so that was kind of my journey to being intellectually interested in crypto. And from there, I spent probably about a year and a half just trying to immerse myself in the information flow and in the community. I was doing basically free research for VCs in New York and just trying to get up to speed and get feedback and curate my information diet. And to me, it wasn't about joining a fund in particular. It was more about, how can I be a part of crypto? What part of this world can I kind of have a place in? And so I looked at a bunch of startups and operating roles and eventually found the guys at Blockchain Capital. They were building out their team at the time, had just raised their fourth fund. There were 5 of them in the company at the time. And so joined them, and we doubled the size of the team right around when I joined. And we've doubled again since then over the last 4 years. And today I help run the research and investment team there and invest kind of broadly across the space in everything from DAOs to protocols to scaling solutions. And we, I guess, wear kind of a variety of hats in the space. We try to, when we make an investment, add value in whatever ways we can. So if that's business development, both within our portfolio and in our LP network and just our broader network within the space, having been around for a while, we can usually find a route in and help foster partnership discussions or commercial deals, things like that. Participating in governance is another one. I think the role of VCs is changing quite a bit, and that evolution is being ushered in by community-owned networks. And so we have to figure out, well, what does that mean for the way that we engage with community-owned projects that aren't structured as companies with boards of directors, et cetera. And that often takes the form of, participating in governance, where, I kind of see our role as like passing on experience from having been a part of a lot of these things and helping newer projects, I guess, operationalize their DAO to an extent. And so for me, that work has included things like helping start the Aave grants program. And I continue to participate on that. And the Nexus Mutual Investment Hub as well, where we provide analysis and review on investment opportunities that the capital pool could be deployed into. So that I hopefully gives a little bit of a kind of broad background. But yeah, I mean, we also have an engineering team and engage with teams on that front as well, and a regulatory practice. But I'm probably more focused on the business development and governance side.
That's a great overview. I love the journey of kind of organically discovering crypto, digging a little bit, figuring out where you fit into the space. I think most of us, can identify with different versions of that process. For me, it was, similar, eventually realizing, hey, I actually want to like help build this thing. I have an operating background, so it was like very natural for me to slot in as an operator. But one of the things that I think is cool about VC in crypto is like I feel like the teams are more operational. Like you're actively involved in Aave grants and help found that and things like that. So anyway, that's super exciting. I'm curious. Like, sounds like you joined Blockchain Capital around 2018. So you've been there for 4 years. It's got to be wild how much the space has changed over that time. How would you describe that journey or like the difference between crypto when you first joined Blockchain Capital and then today?
Yeah. When I first joined, I think it was a much less mature state of being for the crypto industry as a whole. I think at the time we had a lot of revolutionary ideas and folks who were committed to seeing those ideas through, but we had very little to show for it in the way of traction and adoption. And so I spent a couple of years kind of tracking all the metrics on public blockchains, on data sites and aggregators and things like that, and just trying to get a regular pulse for like how many people are using these things, how much money is being spent on paying for fees for these networks and various services built on top, and what does wallet growth look like, and so across the board everything was really quiet for I would say most of the back half of 2018 and 2019. And then really in 2020 with DeFi summer, things started to pick up in kind of a big way. I think Compound really kicked it off with launching their governance token and inventing liquidity mining. And huge kind of inflow of capital followed that. And DeFi went from $1 billion in deposits to well over 100 billion in a very short span of time. And then that has moved over into other categories now. And so then we saw like NFTs got really big, and that's brought in people from lots of different worlds, from the entertainment world, from media, et cetera, from the kind of creator spaces, more traditional creator platforms. People are seeing, okay, well, there's a really interesting opportunity here to engage with my community in a new way, and my fans in a new way. And today, I think what we have is very good evidence that there are real useful applications that can be built with blockchain networks. I don't think that we have mainstream adoption yet by any means. The technology, frankly, just isn't mature enough. It's not safe enough to use. The user experience is difficult to navigate, especially for newcomers. And it really takes like a decent level of homework and sophistication in order to safely use these things. And safe there is probably deserves a little disclaimer, because I'm not sure that me using a blockchain as an experienced user is safe, frankly.
Relatively safe. Yeah. I think I kind of enjoyed trying to figure out how to use blockchain safely as a hobbyist, but like I'm a nerd and have a pretty high, like well above average risk tolerance. I think for true mainstream adoption, like you described, we need a whole nother level of UX and safety. You kind of mentioned that timeline of, we saw DeFi growth, then NFTs. Another area that I think has been growing quickly more recently is DAOs. So curious your thoughts there. It sounds like you are quite involved in the DAO space. So what kind of growth have you seen there? How would you describe the trajectory we're on from a DAO perspective?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's been pretty tremendous. Like, I guess let me maybe provide a bit of a backdrop for like at least how I see DAOs fitting into the broader picture, because they're relevant across the entire space. I mean, to me, they're the kind of native organizational structure for crypto networks, and they align with the values of the space overall. So transparency, meritocracy, and generally aligning people with differing interests towards a common goal, which is, I think, exactly what Bitcoin did originally. And Bitcoin really, in a sense, could be like a prototype for, and people have said this before, I think Vitalik was the first one to point it out, Bitcoin is a prototype for a DAO. It doesn't have on-chain governance. It doesn't have external assets, so it doesn't need it. You can fork away. But Bitcoin did exactly what I think DAOs want to do: align people with differing interests and provide kind of an open form for participation that anyone can be a part of, and something that's truly socially scalable too. So I think like a lot of the ideals are captured in that. And it's been really interesting to see DAOs organically kind of bubble up and form to take on the role of operating open source, open network protocols in the crypto space, as well as popping up in the NFT space and kind of lots of random areas that I would never have predicted a few years ago. But yeah, I mean, maybe just to put some numbers against the growth, I mean, there's tens of billions of dollars, at least. That might be a slightly stale figure with the last week in mind.
Yeah,
but
it's been pretty dynamic
DAO
over the last
treasuries
month or
have
so.
accumulated a very material amount of assets.
Yeah.
That growth has happened faster than I would have expected. That's true for DeFi and NFTs as well. For what it's worth, it's hard to put DAOs in a different category than DeFi and NFTs, because both DeFi and NFTs have DAOs within their I guess verticals, if you can even call them that.
Yep.
But regardless of what the project is trying to do at the end of the day, or what type of product it is, if it's important that it's run in a transparent manner, if it's important that meritocracy is kind of at the core of what that organization needs to look like, and if it's something that aims to align people against a common goal, then I think DAOs can be a really interesting structure to explore for operationalizing an effort, in particular around open source software.
Yeah, absolutely. You're right. DAOs is not really a category. It's like calling businesses or a category or something,
Yeah.
right? It's like just I think you put it well. Like it's a sort of very native way to organize on the internet in the blockchain space, align people towards a common goal. I think that's a great way of putting it. We're even starting to see at Tally, DAOs that are doing like the contributions to governance are very different than what you might see in like a Compound or a Maker, some of the earliest successful DAOs, where it's less about governing a protocol and more about driving a roadmap forward, or a team contributing to a given mission, or maybe it's about like token gated access to a community and creating spaces for other people. So that's super exciting for us to see at Tally, because it's like we're starting to see some more product market fit in like different areas for DAOs. And I think also those areas, they open up the potential for more growth, because like realistically, the number of people who are really going to contribute to like Maker's risk parameters is simply not that high, right? It requires like a certain mindset and skill set, and doesn't necessarily require like a huge number of people to do either. Whereas like earlier I was talking with Diana Chen, who runs Rehash DAO. It's like a podcast media DAO, and everyone is like proposing episodes. We're like sourcing new shows. So for someone like me, who's basically a content and marketing person, I'm like, oh, I can actually plug in here in a way that like, I'm probably not going to do for Maker. So super exciting. Like, I think it's really early, but we're starting to see DAOs, like basically, like you said, any vertical in crypto, we're starting to see the idea of DAOs pop up as a way that people want to organize.
Yeah, I mean, it's really more of kind of an approach or a set of values than necessarily like a category within crypto, which I think is good. I mean, it just shares a lot of the kind of foundational values of crypto and helps propagate those and bring them to other spaces. So I think, to your point, I mean, it's been great to see that creep into the social realm and into the types of application spaces where you have a much broader audience that you can go after.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm curious, from the perspective of an investor, how do you all think about like investing in DAOs specifically? Is that something you do? Are there certain like things that you consider like in that context?
Yeah, I mean, by nature of the things that we've invested in, we've ended up investing in DAOs. I mean, oftentimes, like some of those have been investments in projects that became DAOs later. And the term DAOs was not even necessarily like popularized when we made that investment, but increasingly the organizational structure of the projects that we invest in is trending towards DAOs. So I would say maybe 3 or 4 years ago, we were primarily investing in more traditional companies that were building infrastructure, wallets, brokerages, custodians, et cetera, for the crypto space to help make these networks usable, and that has slowly transitioned towards maybe up to 60% of what we do now is investing in DAOs directly. Because DAOs are the ones who are running these protocols and these open source software projects that are building kind of the next generation of crypto applications. So it's definitely become something that we've had to figure out and orient around and understand much better.
Awesome. I'm curious, you mentioned for crypto broadly to achieve mainstream adoption, you mentioned a couple of challenges or like opportunities we need to solve around safety, UX. I'm curious for DAOs specifically. There's a lot of challenges that DAOs are facing today. It's still very early. Everything from governance models to gas costs to all the other UX problems that crypto faces, DAOs also face. But I'm curious if you have any thoughts on particular areas that you are looking at as, hey, this is an area we really need to solve to help DAOs become, more scalable over time.
Yeah, a couple of things come to mind as being particularly necessary to solve. I think decentralization is one of them. Frankly, a lot of DAOs have not optimized the ownership distribution. And to me, I think it's important for the longevity of a DAO that somebody who's an ideal contributor, who could add a lot of value, who shows up in year 5, feels like they can achieve a level of ownership that makes it worth it for them to participate, and that it isn't just something that's controlled entirely by people who were in the Discord in the first couple of months who maybe are just passive contributors. And so I don't know what the right solution for that would be, but I have some very high level kind of rough ideas.
Yep.
We can get into some of those later. I think the other thing is in terms of what the scope of governance should be at the on-chain level. I see a bunch of different approaches here. The one that I think works the best is a kind of hub and spoke model where you have a hub that really makes sure that all the spokes are held accountable and are adhering to kind of the mission statement of the DAO. And so governance in that sense is a way to ensure accountability over time and ensure alignment with a set of core values. And to do so transparently and maybe to pass large funding proposals. What I don't think governance should do, and what I see happening all the time, is governance voting on all these kind of like little like parameter changes and minutia and like very, very technical things that probably should be analyzed and reviewed not on a public forum, but maybe by a specialized group that has experience and can put it in the context of other similar proposals and measure kind of the effects of those changes and things like that. And I'd love to see governance go more towards delegating responsibilities to groups and then making sure that those groups are held accountable to what they're supposed to be doing over time, rather than having this public forum where every token holder gets to vote on like operational items for what is the equivalent of like voting on what a startup should do on a day-to-day basis, which I think the community probably doesn't have a place in that long term.
Yeah, I think most people don't even want to have a place in it. Like even your average DAO member or token holder, like they don't have the capacity to really add value on most matters, especially more detailed and specialized ones. That makes a lot of sense. So figuring out decentralization or just like token distribution, ownership distribution more effectively, and then thinking about governance models, operational models, trying to make them maybe more efficient over time. Yeah, that makes sense. I mean, if you have thoughts on token distribution, like maybe one step deeper on like potential paths or solutions there, I would definitely love to hear it, because I think it's something a lot of people are thinking about right now.
Yeah, sure. I mean, these are not like super well-baked ideas. Just going to riff a bit here, but sure. I think continuous distribution models are a super interesting area for exploration. So something that comes to mind there would be what Nouns DAO does. I think Nouns DAO is a fascinating experiment in how to distribute ownership in something over time. And for listeners unfamiliar with Nouns DAO, they issue one noun per day as an NFT. That noun is auctioned off. All of the proceeds go into a community-owned treasury, and each noun confers governance rights over how that treasury is spent. Every day, forever, one noun is auctioned off. And so if you show up in 5 years, you can still get one noun every day, just like people who are interested in the project today can participate in those auctions on a daily basis. There is this kind of constant dilution that happens over time, which I think presents an opening and makes it accessible on a longer horizon. So I think that a lot of communities in crypto have mimeticized the token cap or the
Yes.
token supply. I think that's a mistake, and inflation is a design space that we should be exploring.
Absolutely. I love that example. I've actually been talking with a few folks about it. Like earlier this week, I was talking with Shreyas from Llama about the nouns mechanism. He actually was talking about it from a different perspective, which is like that it allows for continuous funding, which is another DAO problem. Is like often there's like a one-time raise, and then you're like, makes it really hard to budget because you don't have like a way to forecast continued revenue because it doesn't exist, right? And then also token liquidity is a challenge, and like they have the treasury is just ETH, which is super liquid. So this is like yet another take, which is democratizes access to governance and the DAO because there's a new DAO every day, and then that's how you get access, to the entire community and resources. I'm actually like kind of surprised we haven't seen more experimentation with that model. I think that they actually just published like some tooling around that where you can like tweak the parameters because like I don't think many protocols might not want to do on like every day,
Yeah.
So I think they actually published some open source code where you can like change the duration and
Yeah.
stuff like that. So hopefully we'll see more there. I think it's compatible with some of like the Open Zeppelin stuff too. So we might be able to just like plug it into our to Tally too, which would be pretty sweet.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's much more rare to have kind of 0 to 1 invention. Versus kind of 1 to n, which is what I think we see more commonly in crypto, where an initial idea is pioneered and then a bunch of forks pop out that fit more or less the same mold, but tweak smaller things here and there. We saw it first with Bitcoin and Bitcoin forks, then we saw it with Ethereum forks. And every once in a while, something novel pops up and kind of challenges the existing paradigm. And I think that to an extent, nouns are doing that on the distribution front. But it certainly is less common. But it makes sense. I mean, it's open source software, so it's really easy to copy it and make small tweaks and deploy them quickly. It's much lower effort than sitting at the whiteboard and figuring out kind of a novel mechanism that is actually going to be useful and is going to move the needle.
Absolutely. I wanted to circle back to your point about the mimetic kind of stickiness of hard cap 21 million, the 21 million Bitcoin thing. I think it's a really good point. I think there's a place for sort of the hard money thing or like assets that get their value from scarcity. But I think that's probably the exception rather than the rule in just general like ecosystems and economies. Like most things don't get their value from scarcity in the world. I think crypto, we're going to build a whole world of things. There's no reason that like most projects should get their value from scarcity. And in fact, like there's a lot of value to the accessibility that comes from doing basically inflation, which is a dirty word, but like, I mean, you're sort of creating that, you're stimulating the economy, right? And I think a lot of projects should be trying to do that.
It's like a public company issuing more shares when they need funding. Right. Or a company that's doing a funding round expanding the options pool because they need to hire more aggressively, and those people need to have ownership in the business as well. And so these are like normal business practices that I think we'll see become more and more common in the token context as well, because it makes sense.
Yeah, even Bitcoin had crazy high inflation at the start, right? Yeah. And that was actually like one of the big reasons it was able to get off the ground. And most projects are like, they're in the like, 2009, 2010 Bitcoin era in terms of their life cycle. So
I think that's right. I mean, I saw this sort of like firsthand, very viscerally in the YFI community when we had this issue a little bit into the existence of that project and community, where the devs really didn't have requisite ownership to be adequately incentivized to work on this thing. And the success of it long term came down to like, are these people going to be motivated to continue working on it and build value for it instead of starting their own project and building kind of their own token where they have more ownership. And so, a bunch of us were thinking about like, what do we do about this? I think the pretty obvious move at the time was, okay, the token distribution was wrong. We need to update it.
Yep.
Right? Like we know more about what this project is going to be now, and so we should make changes. This is software. We can make changes. There are multiple kind of avenues for making those changes, and those should be pursued. And we were met with resistance to expanding the token supply, to allocate it to the developers from the community who valued this meme in particular. This like 30, I forget what the exact supply is, but like it was
super low, right? Because the token value is super high. Like the per token value is super high.
That's right. Yeah. It was 30K, and 30K was a meme. So people were like, "No, there's only ever going to be 30K." We've made so many posters and and memes about this, and it's been a big part of the big driving force.
It's going to be the Bitcoin of DeFi.
Yeah, totally. Yeah. And the reality is, it's like that YFI is absolutely, it's nothing like Bitcoin. It's a very different type of project, and it really has just like kind of very, very different needs. It was interesting to navigate. Ultimately, we got that proposal passed, and we were able to get the devs a reasonable allocation in the token supply that I think is commensurate with their efforts, and also with the reliance, frankly, on incentivizing them long term in order to participate in this thing. But it was a challenge to navigate a public forum where, so some things, and I understand why, but like where memes are actually like a major obstacle sometimes.
Yeah, it's great that you all are engaged on that level though, because that's where the learning comes from, right? It's like super frustrating. Obviously, sometimes you're like, this doesn't make any sense, but like those are the challenges, those kind of like very tactical, like very real challenges of actually navigating DAOs. That's like where the product insights come from. And I definitely feel like, certainly on the investor side, but even at Tally, where we're a DAO tooling company, like we need to be building DAOs. We like Dennison like launches DAOs pretty regularly, and like that's the main reason, right? Like I try to contribute to DAOs, stuff like that, because it's like it sounds nice to build DAO tooling, but if you don't understand like just how like raw the problems are, and like really understand kind of where the source of the challenge is, it's hard to build good tooling. It's probably hard to invest in the space as well.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, I think the way we learn is through experience. So being a part of these things, navigating the challenge firsthand, and taking those learnings and figuring it out over time. It's an iterative process, and I mean, it would be, I think, virtually impossible to invest in crypto effectively if you don't understand what's going on and how these communities actually work and make decisions and change over time.
Awesome. Well, thanks for the back and forth there. Really interesting to get your thoughts on crypto broadly and the DAO space. If it's cool with you, I want to transition to just some broader questions about crypto.
Yeah, absolutely.
On the crypto space as a whole, it's a two-part question. The first part is, what's your favorite part about working in crypto Web3 DAOs? And the second part is, what's one thing about the way the industry works that you don't like today, or that you think needs to change, that we should be working on as a community over the next few years?
Okay, yeah. Let me start with my favorite thing about working in crypto. Definitely the people. I think that crypto attracts really curious people who question the way that the world works, and who think that maybe if we run some experiments and try new things and keep an open mind and design from first principles, maybe we can build something better in the future. And I think that's a really important mindset to have. It's a mindset for progress, and that's what makes me excited. The world is not static. It's a dynamic, fast-moving, evolving organism in a sense. And I think people in crypto recognize that to probably a greater degree than a lot of incumbent spaces do. But like I found myself in TradFi, and a very slow-moving, kind of institutionalized arena with processes and traditions that are difficult to change. And if you think about like, how are you going to build a better financial system? Is it more likely to happen from within this structure that's been more or less cemented over the last, let's call it 70 years or so? Or is it something that's more likely to develop organically outside of that, I think it's clearly the latter. If you look at the arc of innovation historically, incumbents just don't disrupt themselves really. They're not incentivized to do that, so it's very rare to see them do it. And so you find that the most curious people who want to change things within those organizations, they slowly move over to crypto, and that happens in lots of different disciplines, whether it's engineering, folks leaving big tech companies and coming into crypto, finance folks leaving banks and coming to crypto, lawyers leaving law firms to go and help these projects figure out how to navigate the legal and regulatory arena. Really, so many different disciplines, I think, are gathered here. And now things like artists and entertainment. And it's like, I'm not sure that there's any discipline that isn't going to find eventually a home in crypto. And to me, the thing that keeps us here is just the mindset and the ideology and kind of the shared values of the people in the space. So that's what I value. That's why I'm here long term. I mean, aside from kind of the core mission of it, which I believe in, and think is good for the world. And to be clear, I don't think we've achieved it yet.
Sure.
And I think
but that's part of what makes it fun, right? Like,
yeah,
that's why we got to stick around and see it through.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's funny. It's such a common answer that it's like almost everyone's answer, it's always interesting though, because people give like a different perspective on it. But I think it's really interesting because I feel like crypto has this reputation from the outside of being like, we trust the code and like we don't even know who each other are, and like that's kind of like, I don't know, part of the existing brand. But when you get into the space, you realize like everyone's here because they just kind of like each other, and think like working with other people on crypto is interesting. So I don't know, it's kind of ironic in a way.
Absolutely. What was the second part of that question again?
Second part was, what's something that's like you think that you think needs to be improved in the space, right? That we need to work on as a community over the next several years.
Yeah, I think that there's a dangerous tendency to glorify certain individuals who become kind of main characters in the crypto story. That's dangerous because those people are just people.
Yep.
Half of my family is Danish. I grew up partially in Denmark, and we have a sort of an unwritten law, a social contract called Jantelov, and it basically says you're not better than anyone else. Actually, Vitalik tweeted about this recently. I think he used the Swedish version of this or something like that. But I think the idea is really good, and it just says, hey, you're not that important, and no one is.
Yep.
And that, I think, is an idea that crypto would benefit from embodying to a greater extent. Let's not create cults of personality around certain figures. Let's focus on kind of the core values and on making it accessible to a broader group of people.
I love that take. I think one of the things that was really hard about this most recent bull cycle is, we saw several of those kind of like projects and people emerge. And I think it's really hard for newer entrants to the space not to get caught up into that. And it usually ends badly also from like a financial perspective. And so it's always tough to watch that as a member of the industry, because I'm like, there's so many great projects that will feel wholesome and like be edifying for you that like, so I think that's, sometimes just like yelling into the void, and really that's why we're building, right, is to create more surface area of projects that people can join in and kind of have more of a sustainable experience where they're on a level playing field with everyone else.
Absolutely. I mean, I don't think the space would have existed, at least to the extent that it does today, if Satoshi had remained kind of the leader of Bitcoin. His subtraction of himself from the equation, I think, was very intentional, and I mean, it basically, like, he embodies that value of ideas first, people second. I think it's the right approach. I think more projects need to take that approach and let their values speak for themselves, and that's going to be the strongest driver of long-term participation and adoption.
Absolutely. All right. So I have one last question for you. It's not crypto related, although you can make it crypto related if you want. And it's, what is your favorite place in the world and why?
I have a specific, like, small beach on an island in Denmark.
Nice.
About an hour north of Copenhagen, that I just grew up going there in the summers, and it's just a pretty magical space. And in general, I just love the ocean, so I got to go with the beach on that one.
That's beautiful. Yeah, it's just, a small beach. We can't dox it. We got to keep it special.
Yeah, I mean, if we if we meme it, then I won't. It'll get too crowded. I won't be able to go back.
I've had several conversations with people where they like tell me exactly what it is, but not exactly the name of it or where it is, like for their special place. You gotta do that. Cool. Well, thanks, Alex. Really appreciate you spending some time with us during DAO NYC. Hope you have a great rest of the day.
You too. Thanks so much for having me. This was fun.